In this video, I'm going to show you how to use pivot tables in Excel. This is a beginner-friendly video and it also includes shortcut keys that you can use to create pivot tables. Let's get straight into the tutorial. What is a pivot table? A pivot table is a tool that we use to summarize, analyze, explore, and present data. When do we use pivot table? We use pivot table to summarize large data sets, like when we need to generate quick insights from this data. Alright, so let me explain to you step by step how to create a pivot table. Before we create a pivot table, let's just familiarize ourselves with these data sets we want to use to create the pivot table. So this data set is more like a superstore data set. I just extracted these particular columns to explain pivot tables to you. So in this table, you can see that we have customer ID, we have the different customer segments that each customer ID belongs to, and we have the state that each customer is buying from. We also have the region that each customer is buying from, the category of product that the customer bought. Okay, we also have that column. And we also have a column showing the sales for each of the customer, like how much did they buy from us, showing us the sale. And we have another column showing us the quantity, how many quantity of products did they buy, of the particular product they got did they buy. So we also have another column showing that. So this table is just showing us details about customer purchase in our superstore, right? Let's now try to create a pivot table and summarize this large data set, generating quick insights from it. So how do we create a pivot table? The first thing you do is select this your first cell. Okay, so there are two ways to do this. You can either select this and then drag down, but I find that a little bit stressful, especially when you're working with large data sets. So all you have to do is select this first one, hold Ctrl Shift, right arrow key and down arrow key. You select everything with just one click. So now that I've selected all the data now, you can come here to the inserts. In the ribbon section, you see insert, so you click on it and then you see pivot table right here. So I can click on pivot table and it's going to show me this tab. There's another way to do that. You know, I'm a lover of shortkeys when I'm using Microsoft Excel. So here is the shortcut you can use. Instead of coming to insert, you may forget, like most of the time you forget where each of the two is. So you might be looking for it. So instead of that, you can just keep this shortcut somewhere. You can write it down somewhere. Press Alt-N-V. And it's going to just open this tab. It will open the pivot table directly. So I'm going to click on from this table or range. Alright, so it's going to pop up the same tab that we had the other time. Alright, so from this pop-up tab now, what this tab is just showing us is this one is showing us the range that we already selected. You can see it's highlighting a green line showing that we selected this range. So the range covers the entire data set. That's correct. So we are not going to touch that. Alright, so this place is telling us that choose where you want your pivot table to be placed. Okay, do you want your pivot table to be in this same worksheet or you want it to be in another worksheet entirely? So that's what this part is asking us. So let's put it in another worksheet so that we can see what we are actually analyzing, because this is a beginner friendly tutorial course. Alright, so I'm going to leave the new worksheet selected, but if you want it to be on the same worksheet, you click on this existing worksheet. Alright, so let's click new worksheet for now. So add this data to the data model. Maybe we'll explain this in another video entirely, but let's just move on to the pivot table we are trying to create. So I'll just click on OK now, and then you can see that it opened a new tab because I said you should create my pivot table in a new worksheet. So it opened a new tab where I have this pivot table 1 and then I have this pivot table fields. You don't have to worry, I'm going to break down everything, what each of it means in this video. So in case you open this tab or this your tab opened and you can't find this tab here, pivot table fields, you can't find it. So let me say I mistakenly cancelled it or you can't find it. How do you bring it back? You can come here to pivot table analyze and then you see field list. Just click on this under this show, just click on field list and it's going to pop up the tab. All right, so let's now explain pivot table fields. All right, so this first section is where you can search. So let's say we have plenty columns in our data set. We don't want to start scrolling here. Okay, so this is the part where you see all the columns that you have in that data set. So let's say I don't want to start scrolling and looking for the data set. I can use this search box. So let's say I want to look for region. You can see when I typed region, it's just popping out region, all right? And I can cancel it to show the entire columns again. So I have my customer ID, the segment, state, region, category, sales. And if you check the cheat sheets we created the pivot table form, you can see we have customer ID segment. Same columns that we have is what is displaying here. So this is the part where you see all the columns that are in your data table, okay? So now let me explain what each of these fields, because it's saying drag fields between areas below. What does filter means? What does column means? What does row means? And what does value means? Let's explain that. We use rows to organize data by rows. I'm sure you know what row is. So row is like all this number here. If you don't know what row is, I have a beginner friendly video on Excel, so you can check that up on this channel and watch to understand how to identify a row and a column. Okay, so you can see different rows that I'm touching. So our data will be arranged row wise. Anything we drag to this row, it will be arranged row wise. That's basically what it's saying. And column, if you drag any data to this column, it will be arranged column wise. So you have the data column wise. All right, so now let's go to values. All right, so what do we use these values for? So values is used for like metrics, or when you want to calculate the aggregate of something. I hope that's not too complicated, so let me break it down. When we talk about aggregates, we are talking about like you want to calculate the sum of a particular number, you want to calculate the average of a particular number, you want to calculate maybe counts of a categorical column, okay? So that is, if you want to use aggregate, basically you want to get like metric, that's when you use this value section, okay? And this filter section is used to filter out the data. So let's say we have different product category and we only want to see what is happening in a particular category, so we can just use the filter section to do that. Enough of the explanation, let's go into the practical aspect. So let's say we want to know the sales by each of the segments. All right, so let's go back to the data set. So we have segment column, right? We have different segments. You can see consumer, home office, and different categories of segments. And we have sales. So we want to create summary table showing us the different segments, the different category of segment that we have, and the overall sum of sales that each of the category gave us. Okay, so before you solve a problem, make sure you understand the question. So if you don't understand what I just said now, make sure you replay this video or backward it to understand the question. Okay, so now what we are going to do is we are going to work with these rows and values first, because it's just two columns we want to work with right now. So I said we want to know the different segment, different categories of segments and the sales, right? So I want the segment to be shown row wise. So let me say I drag the segments to the rows. You can see right here that I have the segments arranged in rows. Can you see what I mean by rows now? Okay, so now that we've dragged the segment to the rows, all you have to do is just click here and drag. When you click, you hold it and drag and drop it here, so it's going to appear. So I said we want to know the segment, the different sales for each segment. So that means the second column I'm working with is this sales, and I'm going to be dragging sales to values. So most of the time, when anything you want to drag to these values has to be a column that contains like numbers. I said most of the time, not all the time, okay? So you can also have like categorical data also in the values, right? So now let's drag these sales there. You can see that automatically I did not even tell the pivot table that I want it to be the sum, but because the value section we get the aggregates. If you remember when I was explaining, I said it's going to get the aggregates, okay? So aggregates is like sum, count, average, so it automatically generated the sum. So it calculated the sum for all the consumer segments. It calculated the sum for all the corporate segments and then calculated the sum for the home office segment as well. Alright, so let's say this is not properly arranged. Maybe we want the highest number to come up and the lowest number to come down. We can sort it. So click on this first number and right click. You see a sort option. If you want it to show from smallest to largest, you can see that it is rearranged. Now home office is coming first, the smallest number is coming up. That's by the way. So you can now see that how we can create, we just created a summary table from this large data set, all right? So another thing that we can do, let's say this value section, the aggregate I want to calculate is not for the sum function. I don't want to use the sum. I actually want to get the average sales for each of the categories. So all I have to do, you can do this in two ways. Let me explain the simple method. I know everybody wants simple. Okay, so the simple method is just come up here, double click on this. It's going to open this value feed settings tab to you, where you can pick whether it's the count you want, the average, the max, mean, product. You have different category, count numbers, variance, products. You have different categories. So I said, let's say I want to get the average. So I'm going to be clicking on average. And you can see, you can also change the name. It's now showing average of sales. Let's say I just want it to be average sales. You can clear it. You can write anything you want as well here. So I can just click OK now. And then it will calculate the average sales. And you can see now that I calculated the average is the consumer that has the least average sales, followed by the corporate segment of customer, followed by the home office, all right? And if I want the highest to come up and the lowest to come down, you remember the step, just come here to the sort option and then you do largest to smallest and then it's going to rearrange. All right, so the second method for the value field setting I just did now is for you to come under this value section, click on this drop down here, and then you see the value field settings here. So it will open the same tab that we used when we double click there. I'm sure it's the shortcut you like, so that's fine. I also prefer to use the shortcut. Okay, so that's just by the way. So another thing that we can do when using PivotTable is, let's say we have this average sales as 240.9493 blah blah blah. I don't want it to be showing me long decimal place. I want to reduce that. Okay, so what I can do is I can still come back to the value field setting, or we can use the shortcut as always, then come to the number format section here, click on it, and then you can now choose the number format you want. If you want to, if it is a current, like obviously it's currency, right? So you can click currency. You want to add symbol to it, the number of decimal place. Let's say I just want it to be 1 decimal place. Then I can click OK and then OK here. Can you see? So it added $240 blah 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 to it. All right. So those are just some formattings you can do when you are creating pivot table in Excel. All right, so now we've seen what rows looks like, right? I'm sure we know that. So let's try to change it from rows to column. I just want you to see the difference. Let's drag. Okay, so we can drag this segment. Oh, sorry. Just click here. It's going to appear back. So we can drag these segments from rows to columns. Can you see what happened? So it's now showing us the different category, column wise, column wise. That's what it's showing us now. All right, so we can drag it back to rows. All right, so this is what we have, and you can just see that by just dragging and dropping, we already have a summary table showing the average sales for different customer segments, right? So to create a second pivot table, so let's say this time around, I've created this summary table to answer this business question. I want to answer another business question. You don't need to go back to the data set, start creating pivot table again. You don't need to do that. All you can do is just highlight this one that you created, Ctrl C to copy. Anywhere, you can just paste it anywhere. So let me just paste it down here. I'll paste the same table here. So all I'll just do is drag it out. All right. So it will give me another empty pivot table. All right. So this other empty pivot table that I have, let's answer another business question. So the second business question I'll be answering now is to get the quantity that each of the states got from us. Or should we use region? Okay, let's use region. So we have different region, right? So we want to know how many quantity each of the region got from us, all right? So you already guessed right, I'm sure. So we are going to drag the region to the rows, right? And then I'm going to drag the quantity to the values. Okay, so now is already generating the sum of quantity, and I think I'm okay with sum of quantity. I just want to get the sum. What is the total quantity for each? So let's say I want to rename this. I don't want it as sum of quantity. I want it to be total quantity. All right, so you can see I just changed that here. So I'll say okay. So now I want to only see the top two region, the top two region, okay, with the highest quantity. That's what I want to say. So I may first choose to sort it, right click and sort from largest to smallest, and then I'll click on this drop down beside this row label, and I just want to use the value filter. Okay, the value we work for the numbers, right? Why the label filter we work for the letters, all right? So like this region, if it's the region you want to edit, you come to the label filter. Maybe you want to only show the one that does not begin with, begins with, ends with, contains, does not contain, blah blah blah. But this time around is the value filter we are using. And I want to see, you can see this option for top 10. I said we want to see the top two regions, right? So I'm going to click on this top 10. And then if you want to see the list, you click on this bottom, but we are using top right now. So I want to see the top two. So instead of 10, I'll clear this 10, I'll put 2. All right. So by total quantity. So that's right. I'll just say, okay. It's going to filter it out and just show me the top two regions with the highest quantity. So let's remove the filter. You can just come here and click here back, clear filter. Now let's get the total sales for each customer segment by their region. Okay. The first thing I said is total sales, right? So the way you understand the question, you can pick it step by step from there. I said total sales, so that means sales will go to values, right? All right, we now have the overall total sales. So if you want to create KPIs or something, so this is how you create it. You just get your KPI like this and you're good to go. So I said total sales for different customer segments. That means we're working with segments. So let me just drag my segment to the columns, all right? And then for different regions, right? So I can drag my regions to the rows. So you can see the breakdown. You can now see that for in the central region, we have, this is the total sales for the consumer that we have for the central region. This is the total sales for the east region, consumers segments in the east region. This is the total sales. So that is how you can also mix it up. All right, so you can even have it more, we can even break it down more. All right, so instead of having this segment in column, we can have 2 columns inside one of these fields. So I have region here already. I'm going to drag this segment inside, and you can see that we can minimize this, and then it's going to show us the different region. All right, so if you want to see the breakdown by segment, I can say, okay, well, let me see the different, how each segment in the central region did. Then I can expand this and say, oh, the consumer segment in the central has this total sum of sales. All right, so you can have it like that. I'm just showing you the different things that you can do with pivot tables. All right, now that we've used this, I'm going to use this filter box so that you have a full knowledge of what each of the pivot table fields is used for. So let's say we want to filter by the category, the product category. All right, so you can filter by the year, you can filter by anything. All right, so let's say this time around we want to filter by the product category. I can just click, drag the category to the filter, and then it's going to show us more like a pop-up tab up here. You can click on the drop down, and then you see we have different categories of products. We have the furniture, home supplies, and technology. So let me say I want to see only the total sales for office supplies alone, and then I'm going to click OK. You can see that the value changed. So in the central the consumer for the office supplies, not for all the product category now, just for the office supplies. This is the total sales for it, blah blah blah, like that. So if we change it, we can say we want to see for only furniture. You can see now for furniture, the consumer segment in the central region bought a total sales of 86,229. And I'm sure you remember the number formatting we did the other time that we did for this one, where we added dollar and changed the decimal place. So you can also apply that to this one. There's one other thing I want to tell you before the end of this video. First thing I want to show you in this video is how to insert slicer to your pivot tables. Alright, so what are slicers? Slicers are just like visual filters for your categorical data. Alright, so we have this kind of filter, but this one is not. Okay, let's just create the slicer so you can see what I mean. Alright, so let me remove this filter first, because that is the same column we are using for filter. For slicer, right? So let me select this. To insert slicer, you come to the insert ribbon here, and then you click on under the filter section, you see slicers. All right. So this slicer is just for to filter data visually, and this timeline works for time data. If you have like dates and you want them to be able to filter it by January, February, March, all those things, you can go for timeline. Okay, so in this case, I'm going for with slicer, right? So I'll click on slicer. Then it's going to give me a list of all the columns I have in my data set and asking me which I want to use. So we want to use the category of product, right? So I'm going to click on category. I'm going to check it and click on OK. It's going to give me like a box where I can add filter to, and I can even add this box to my dashboard where users can, okay, just look at this. If I click on office supplies, it's going to filter the data by the office supplies. If I click on technologies, if I click on furniture, it's going to filter. So it's just like a visual data filter. A visual filter is better than the one I used previously. Okay, so if you want to remove the filter, you can click on this clear filter button. So this filter now is attached to this pivot table. If you want to attach it to another pivot table that is not currently attached, okay, remember I selected this pivot table when I wanted to create the slicer. That's why it's connected to only this one. You see that it's only the value in this table that is changing. This one is not changing, right? So let's say I want to connect it to this other table. All you have to do is right click on this and then report connection. I'm already teaching you. I know I'm already going far, but there's no problem in learning, right? Okay, so you're going to click on report connection, and then this is your pivot table 1, this is your pivot table 2. So let's say I want to connect all the pivot tables to this filter. I'm just going to check everything and click OK. So once I click on office supply, everything would filter by the technology, by furniture. If I want to cancel the filter, if you want to select multiple, maybe you want to see for furniture and office supplies at the same time, you click on this to select multiple, so you can select 2 at a time. So it's going to show you the total quantity in the west region for office supplies and quantity. If you want to remove the filter, same process, you remove it like this. So in this video, I've showed you how to create pivot table, what each pivot field means, what the filter, column, row, segments, values does, and how to use the aggregates in the value section. I showed you how to search for different columns that you have in your table and how to use slicer in this video. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed watching this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get notified the next time I post a tutorial content like this.